Welcome everybody to the Long Talk. And today we have the privilege of interviewing Warren Brosnihan, former Shark, Lion, Blue Bull in both Super Rugby and the Currie Cup, a man who played for Ulster in the Heineken Cup and the Celtic Cup, and we'll get to that later, who played for Calvisano in Italy, who had a stint with the then Perth Reds in Rugby League in '96 in Australia. The Perth Reds went on to become the Melbourne Storm. A man who played 6 test matches for the Springboks, including 2 against the All Blacks. He is currently a rugby commentator for Supersport in South Africa. And one of his greatest achievements was surviving 5 years in high school with me, my very good mate, Warren Brosnihan.
Hey, Jono, how's it going? Good to catch you in New Zealand, man.
It's good to see you, Bros, and thank you for making time to join us for the Long Talk. If I was to ask you, Bros, what's your earliest sporting memory?
Good question, actually, especially coming from New Zealand. My earliest sporting memory, and it's a rugby one, is the 1981 tour of the Springboks toured New Zealand, the infamous Flower Bomb series. It's my greatest memory as far as my shaping rugby. I remember as a youngster waking up early in the morning with my old man, my father, my mother, to watch the games. And back then, the rugby, obviously, it wasn't geared around TV like it is nowadays. And those games must have happened probably 1 o'clock in New Zealand time. So it was very early in the morning here in South Africa. And waking up in the morning with some Milo, a blanket, and watching these games. And that's really what shaped me. And it's where my passion for the game, honestly, it's where my passion for the game started, just watching that test match series, all the things that were going on, the planes flying overhead, dropping the flower bombs, the sides, everything that took part in the tour. Absolutely, as a youngster, it really it got hold of me, and it set a dream that I wanted to play rugby at the highest level. And that's where it all started, Jono, I suppose. And I wasn't there. Yeah, I was a youngster, probably 9, 10 years of age. I had to do the maths to work out how old I was. But
we would have been 9.
Yeah,
we would have been 9. I remember it's my earliest rugby memory. Also waking up with the Milo with the dad, and I still remember in that last test, the flower bomb test, walking up to the TV and pointing. You know, you're 9 years old, you don't know much about the game, and you understand broadcasting. And I remember pointing at the TV as this plane swooped down and dropped the flower bombs, and going to my dad, "Does this happen in every game? Because this is really cool. This is rugby where you're playing like this and you're having to keep an eye on the Luftwaffe." I thought this is a game for me. What other sports did you watch with your family, with your dad?
I mean, Jono, you know that I love my sport as a youngster. I mean, whether it was cricket, athletics, I loved it. I mean, we were a family that was active. When we had holidays, it'd be an active holiday. We'd be going to the beach, we'd be going to the dam, we'd be windsurfing, we'd be in the sea. So whether it was surfing, whether it was playing cricket, whether it was whatever it happened to be, I enjoyed the outdoors, and I enjoyed being physical and pushing myself. That's something that's which. And today, I'm not 50 yet, 48, but it still shapes me nearly 48, 50 years later. That's part of my DNA, I believe.
And when did you play the classic cricket in the garden, in the driveway with your brother?
No, of course, of course. We broke many windows. Used to take the old tennis ball and tape it up like you do with some insulation tape, get it to swing. And the backroom. It was a backroom cricket, backroom rugby, playing touch rugby. It was a bit of a mismatch with my brother because rugby wasn't. He liked it, but it was a mismatch. Let's put it that way. So
you're a bit bigger than him.
We had great fun, my brother and I, and that's where having a brother sometimes is fantastic. We would be in the backyard playing cricket, whatever it happened to be, or rugby.
And your first time with your first time actually out on a rugby pitch. I've chatted to a couple of guys, and they go, "Yeah, we ran out there at age like 4, 5, and we're playing full contact." Were your first experiences of rugby full contact, or had you got sort of touch and ripper back in the day?
No, it was full contact. Back there, we played mini rugby. We had like I think we called it mini rugby on a Sunday. And my father used to take us down to, there was a club down in Durban next to the Kings Park Rugby Stadium called College Rovers. And when I was a 9, 10-year-old, on a Sunday morning, we would be playing barefoot rugby, and I think we were 10 aside. I think we had a front row and a second row, and we would play every Sunday. And at that stage, we weren't really playing rugby at school, so it was actually really good because it got me geared towards when I got a little bit older and we were playing. And I think it was standard 2 primary school we started playing rugby at school.
Like year 4 of school?
Year 4. Yeah, I still get a bit mixed up. Yeah, year 4, grade 4.
Year 4. So, did you really kick into playing school sport at high school?
Yeah, I think high school was the standard 6 year. John, you were there with me. I think it was a big year for me.
Second form,
going into
year
high
8,
school.
whatever.
Year 8, going into high school, and just going into this bigger pool of players, and suddenly you're getting challenged, and suddenly there's a little bit of testosterone that's flowing through your body because you're going through puberty, and suddenly I found myself scoring a try or 2, enjoying it, and it just seems to build. One thing leads to another. And I've got very fond memories of my first year at high school, playing sport and trying to make it in this big little guy coming into high school. It seems like such a big place, but when you look back now, it's not that big. But it was like a major thing for us, and for me, that was instrumental in my schooling and that set a very good foundation.
I still remember when we were second form, first year in there in high school, going into the change room after the first team rugby had practice, and there was a huge prop by the name of Warren Barr. Do you remember?
I remember
Warren Barr. And we were, my voice was still up here. And Warren Barr walked out of the shower, and he looked like a bear, just had like a chest wig like this. And I remember thinking, my word, this is a whole nother world here, right? And walked backwards out of the first team change room. Now, you were head boy or head prefect in your final year of school. You were widely expected to make the Sharks schoolboy rep side in your final year of school, and also widely expected to push for selection in the South African schoolboy side. But all of those expectations were upended. What happened?
No, just in that final year of school, I got sick. And the amazing thing is that I ended up with, I had 3 spots in my lungs where I had this pneumonia, this focused pneumonia. I had septicemia and pleurisy, and I was very, very sick in hospital. And the amazing thing was it was actually caused through rugby, which sounds totally crazy. But it was a different form of pneumonia, and it was because I got this infection. I was playing, and as you do when you're a schoolboy, I had all these, we called them roasties, all the grass burns on my elbows, and I had hardly any skin left on my elbow. And I'll never forget, we were playing against one of the schoolboy sides, and I thought, as a youngster, I thought, I'm going to have to strap this up because I can't just have this exposed and open. So I got like gauze, put it over it, and then I didn't have any. As schoolboys, we didn't have any elastoplast and the proper taping. So I had insulation tape for putting around my head. Next thing I'm strapping this insulation tape around my elbow and played the game. And after the game, obviously with whatever happened, I ended up getting all these boils, and it was like a line of boils where I'd put the tape. The following week, I played the game again, and my elbow was damn sore. I'll never forget because this whole thing was inflamed, and I actually ended up breaking my left wrist because I couldn't take the weight onto my elbow, and that gave me a blood infection which got lodged in my lungs and caused pneumonia. I ended up as a youngster who was probably only weighing about 90 kilograms at the time. Before I knew it, I was weighing 76, 75 kilograms, lying in hospital fighting for my life, and so I never got the opportunity really to play provincial rugby, and that had always been my dream and my goal as a youngster, because it just happened that I went in to hospital the week that we had we called it Natal Schools in those days, Natal Schools Trials or Sharks Trials, and I was going to represent the area north of Durban in those trials at number 8, and I never made it. I was sitting in hospital.
I still remember you coming back weeks later from convalescing, and it looked like your head had shrunk. like your hair was too big for your head. You'd lost so much weight. It looked like you shrunk down, obviously from fighting this infection. Now, obviously that then threw a huge span in the plans, because I'm sure you were hoping to progress. Those were still the days of of amateurism, amateur rugby, the early 90s. So finishing school in 89, 1990, how did that affect your plans post school?
Well, it was actually amazing because that's, you know what it's like as a schoolboy. You said my folks sat me down, made me write my goals down, what I wanted to achieve, and that was one of the items I'd written down that I wanted to achieve was play for my province at schoolboy level, and I hadn't made it, so I was devastated as a youngster. And I wasn't, I'm trying to process this whole thing, but when I look back in retrospect, it was probably the best thing that happened to me because it gave me the hunger to carry on and to fight. Because what happened is the following year, and it was probably a blessing in disguise, I went on Rotary Exchange, went to Australia, was based in Canberra, pretty exciting place, good place to be. And I spent a year in Canberra.
Instead of sarcastic. Wait,
I say it's sarcastic because everyone says that, but I actually loved it. And spent the year in Canberra. And I went into the schooling system in Canberra, and I was in the north of Canberra, and managed to get selected there for the ACT equivalent, or was the ACT Brumbies or their schoolboy tournament. So I got to play in the Australian National Championships in 1990 in their schoolboy championships. So for me, that was I didn't quite get it in South Africa what I wanted to do, but I managed to play it there in Australia, and in some ways it was really different, and it opened the world, and I met new people, and so that was amazing. It was an amazing experience to have that year in Australia as a development stage for me as a human being, an individual, and let me come back when I came back from Australia, I was really confident to try and give it a go in South Africa.
So if I was to ask you to describe for our New Zealand listeners, we've got some other listeners around the world, how would you describe South African schoolboy rugby?
It's passionate. I mean, it's actually amazing. And we're probably going to get into this discussion a bit later. We see the crowds dwindling at some of our franchise level games and stuff like that. It's not happening at schoolboy level here in South Africa. The people are out there watching. There's a passion about the schoolboy game, and it's in a way it's quite worrying. But sometimes you'll see more. I don't know if it is worrying or not. So I've got to qualify the statement. But you'll have like a Currie Cup game happening on a Saturday in South Africa, but there are more people going to watch the schoolboy game that's happening around the corner. So there's a huge interest. I mean, rugby, we've got to grow the game, and rugby's obviously taken a few shots over the years with a few bad decisions, but it's still, I mean, New Zealand's a passionate rugby country, one that I've got the utmost respect for, and there's no greater country, I believe, for me or as a South African to go play the game than in New Zealand. But here in South Africa as well, we've got that same. It's passionate, and we do love our rugby, and the boys get exposed to it quite young as schoolboys, and it's part of our DNA, I believe.
Now, what was different when you went in 1990 and you were playing in Canberra? What did you find was different about how rugby was played even back then between schoolboys in Australia and schoolboys in South Africa?
It was massive. And I think the rugby games we played for the school, we played midweek. The school, I went to a government school, so rugby wasn't really the focus. They were bigger. They preferred rugby league. It was my first introduction into rugby league, so I played predominantly for my school at rugby league. They had one or two games playing rugby union, but not many. And because I was I'd grown up playing rugby union. I wanted to play rugby union. I went and joined a club called West in Canberra. And as a 17, 18-year-old, I started playing. I played club rugby for that club. And I think I was playing for the third team at men's level, but still at school. And that's where I first met Rod Kafer, who now commentates for Australia. He was playing for that club. Matty O'Connor was another one who played centre as well. So schoolboy in Australia, especially government level, was more rugby league. The private schools in Canberra, where I was, it was more rugby union, but I was at a government school. So the opportunities at rugby union weren't that great with the school. So it's almost weird the way I made it into that ACT team, but I think it was because of the games I was playing for my club. That's where they really got to see me, because the school I was at was predominantly a rugby league club.
A Rugby League Cup. Now, when it comes to the style of rugby that you experience, now, for those of you who don't know, the rugby in the different areas of South Africa, traditionally, the rugby that was played in KwaZulu-Natal is a more running style of rugby at schoolboy level than some of the other provinces. But when you compare the rugby that you were playing and you were being trained in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa versus the way it was taught and the way you were trained in ACT, Australian Capital Territories, in 1990, what was the difference?
It's tough. You know, probably the skills. There was a lot of emphasis on skills when you came to coaching time. I believe in Australia, and they spent a lot of time on it. I think in South Africa, what they did is they said skills. The guys learn the skills because we play touch rugby. John, you knew every Sunday, every Wednesday there'd be a touch squad go touch rugby being played by the schoolboys, and we'd basically self-generate our own skills by playing the touch rugby that we play. We would spend from 2 o'clock until 5 o'clock playing touch rugby on a Sunday. It was our Sunday, and then on school holidays we'd be down on the beach and we'd be playing touch rugby on the beach till our feet were bleeding from the sand, rubbing the skin off the bottom of our feet. That's how I grew up as a youngster. So we learned our skills there, as opposed to when you got to the training session. I believe in South Africa it was more about, it was quite a traditional set piece orientated. Do this, do that. Your plays. What are you going to? How are you going to do it? Australia was teach you again learning more skills in the training session, which I picked up on. And obviously, you remember rugby union in Australia, especially back then, wasn't you got Australian rules. You know the story in New Zealand, rules, rugby league. There's a lot of other competing sports there as well. So you've got to compete for your little bit of space there. But I think it was just a different attitude, I think. And the thing about Australia and New Zealand is that I believe the players come through younger than what we do in South Africa. And I think they're given that gap. And like where I was sitting when I was in Australia, suddenly if I wanted to play rugby, I had to go join a club. And there was no under 21s, there was no under 18s. I had to go play the seniors as a youngster.
Right.
So suddenly you're thrown into this, and you've got to either you sink or you flounder. I don't know what it's like there now. So and you would see these youngsters coming up in Australian rugby or even New Zealand rugby, very, very young, whereas the South African, stereotypically South African, it doesn't happen all the time, but back then would start maybe 21, 22, 23 starts coming through. You'd see this 18, 19, 20-year-old coming through out of Australasia, where you wouldn't really see that in South Africa.
Right. So you come back, in fact, you say that, I'm thinking immediately of Oren and Little in 91.
Correct. It's a very good example. Very good example. Two fantastic players, two fantastic blokes, and I mean, they were probably one of the best centre pairings the world has seen.
So you come back to South Africa in 91, right? And suddenly South Africa is let back into world sport, right?
Oh, can I just quickly ask about did you go to Craven Week? Because I mean, that's one of those sort of big things. So you missed out on that because of your illness?
So that's what John was speaking about. So that Craven Week was the South African National Championships that we've got every year. In fact, now with what's happening with COVID-19, it's the first time that it's been postponed, delayed, I think since 1964 or 19, whatever. I can't remember the date offhand. I might be just off with that date, but it's been a long time. It's been running every single year. And I didn't go. So the amazing thing is that I actually, it was held up in Johannesburg that year, and I drove up and went to watch that Craven Week. Watched from the sidelines, not playing, watched the Natal team that I wanted to play. And my first training session and my comeback after that sickness was actually one of the fields up in Johannesburg, where I honestly thought, I don't want to vocalize what I thought, because I felt so bad. And it was obviously also the altitude up there, and I tried to run and do my first running session on a field after getting out of hospital. And it wasn't a pretty sight, but that was the journey that I took.
So now, to try and describe to New Zealanders, Australians, people around the world that are listening to this, what it was like and the impact it had on society in South Africa to go from being pariahs and the sort of outcasts of the world generally, right, and suddenly being allowed back into international sport and seeing not only the international teams playing cricket or rugby or whatever it may be, but even provincial teams, Super Rugby, contacts, all this kind of thing. How would you describe to people the magnitude of that sea change in South African culture in those early days of the 90s?
As you're vocalizing and talking now, I'm getting goosebumps. That's how, and it takes me back to 91, 92, Super 10 rugby, watching the Sharks come out and play on their first Super 10 tour, and watching them play in New Zealand, and hearing the New Zealand commentator talking about the South African players, and seeing the Australians who were so, they obviously, they were so good and so skillful. And for me, there were two seminal moments in South African history, if we want to look at it from a historical point of view and as a nation point of view. One was Nelson Mandela coming out of prison, coming out of Victor Verster prison and walking out. Where did I watch that? I watched that sitting at the family that I was staying with in Australia, in Canberra, watched Nelson Mandela walk out of prison. So I watched that from afar. Then we had 1994, our first free and fair democratic elections that happened in South Africa, happened in 1994. Right. Again, that was my first touch of professional rugby in South Africa. I happened to be on a Super 10 tour, and we were in Auckland, and we cast our first vote in Auckland. I cast my first vote for South Africa in Auckland, New Zealand, of all places. So there's a huge tie-in with how my personal life has been interwoven with Australia, New Zealand, South Africa.
I still remember sitting at Kings Park, and you were playing for the Sharks, and I managed to get in there early. I had really good seats, and I sort of came down during the warm-up game, and I was sitting behind Ian McIntosh, the Sharks coach. I was sitting behind Gary Teichman. They were sort of watching the warm-up game, and then before they went and got changed and everything. And I was listening to them. Then they got up, they wandered off, and then the Auckland Blues came out. It was a Super Rugby game. So the Auckland Blues come out, and out comes Sean Fitzpatrick, out comes John Elomu, out comes these, legendary All Black players, and run on the field. And I'm watching them warm up, and I'm watching them go back inside to finish taping up. And I'm thinking to myself, Bros is going to play these people. And it's still, although it was, maybe 4 years after being brought back into World Rugby, I was still watching them and going, I can't believe Bros is actually going to play these people. It still was, in those, by mid 95, 96, whenever that game was, it was still like mind-blowing.
Well, that was I'll tell you what, from a South African perspective, it was mind-blowing for me as well. It was mind-blowing for us. That I know the game that you're talking about, 1998. It was Super 12, first game of the season. It was up against the Auckland Blues. Auckland Blues then remember, Crusaders hadn't yet achieved what they went on to achieve.
Yes.
At that stage, the Auckland Blues were the pinnacle. You had
Joe, as late as 98.
You had Joe Elomu, you had Carlos Spencer. It was intensely physical. The most physical game that you were going to have in that Super Rugby series was going to come up against the Auckland Blues. And us as a Sharks team, we'd trained that whole off season, and we'd targeted that first game, and we knew we were going to be playing in February in Durban. It's going to be hot and humid. It's going to be sticky. The ball's going to be slippery, and we're going to come up against these guys from New Zealand that are incredibly physical. And the only way you can meet them is you've got to meet them physically as well and meet that physical challenge. And then you've got to use your skills as well to win. But if you step away from that physical challenge, you're going to get blown away. We trained, and in that game, we considered ourselves massively the underdogs. And we ended up winning it. And I'll never forget, I think with the ball, it got passed to me from a ruck, and the ball came so hard, it like the old Butterfingers Bros almost knocked the ball on, but didn't knock it on. I came infield. Henry Honeyball caught it, went in to score. And it was a game very, very tight, and a game I'll always remember. And some of my greatest memories are playing against the Auckland Blues, the games at Eden Park. What a stadium. 1994, the first time that I was on that Super 10 tour that I referred to when we traveled. I was one of the dirty dirties. I didn't play any of the main games. I was playing we played midweek games on that tour. I think I played Thames Valley, and I played Western Australia were the two games I played back then. But I'll never forget setting foot on Eden Park was like hallowed turf for me. I'd never seen a ground that looked so immaculate. The ground, the grass had been cut. It was absolutely, it was like that fluorescent green. And it was absolutely magnificent. It's a memory that'll live with me for a long time.
When you stood on that field, you know, and again, just to try and encapsulate this for people overseas, it's not only the awe of playing in New Zealand as a professional rugby player, but it's because it just hadn't taken place for 20 years, right? It just was so unusual. And did you think to yourself, I'm standing on that same field where the flower bombs were being dropped as a little boy?
Of course I did. That went through my, of course I did, John. I mean, that's exactly what was so symbolic for me. It was the first rugby field. I think, well, we played Thames Valley, and I played in that game, but I played with a broken foot in my bone. I broke one of my metatarsals, but there was no ways that I was going to tell the coach, because it was going to be my second game for the Sharks, and I was playing with all these legends. And I was a youngster, and I thought, geez, but you've just got to play. You've got to grin and bear it. Your foot might hurt, but you've got, you know, how many times you're going to get, how often you're going to get this opportunity. So I ran onto the field, and I must say, at that stage, I was quite slow around the pitch, but it was because I was running with a broken bone in my foot. But we played that game, and the wind was absolutely howling. That's one thing I remember when we played that game in Thames Valley. But to set foot on that on Eden Park, and then I think when I came back with the Lions in 1997, the Gauteng Lions, our first game was again at Eden Park, and it was a game where again the Auckland Blues were very, very strong. Zinzan Brook, Sean Fitzpatrick, Robin Brook, Ronnie Clark. I'm going to make a mistake by trying to name all the players, but it was just amazing to play in that game. And the big guy, I can't forget the scrum half's name, the massive big scrummy. It was like an extra loose forward. Just incredible.
Who let you know that you'd been selected for the Springboks?
Interesting. That's it. Actually, we played in a Currie Cup game for the Lions. And I think we just played against Western Province down in Cape Town, and we were flying back. And I didn't really get, it wasn't like I got told, it was almost like one of the management from the team came and said, I think you've been selected for the Springboks. And then the next thing, I had all these guys on the airplane flying back saying, oh, you've been selected. And that's how I basically found out after the game, flying back. And I remember James Small, I tried to tackle him, and his boot his sprig had caught into the corner of my nose here. And at half time, they had to, this whole flap was flapping. And probably the sorest thing that's ever happened to me on the rugby field, because no amount of anesthetic that they sprayed into that nose could dull the pain when that guy was stitching this whole nose, the side of my nose here, back onto my face from his boot, getting stuck in my nostril and bringing it off. But so I had this like mangled face, blue nose, black eye, and I rocked up at the Springboks with the Springboks the following week. But it was just an incredible experience.
You're in that plane, and all your teammates are coming. You've been selected. Did it feel real?
No, it didn't. That's why I actually almost didn't believe it until I saw it, because you're never sure the guys are winding you up. So you like, but when the management came, and the management came, and one of the management said, "No, you've made it." I kind of like, but I wanted to see it for real, you know. And it's like, it was weird, because it's like this dream that you're going for. And now these guys are telling you you've made it, but you want to actually see the hard copy. You know, I want to see the hard copy. Don't tell me I've got a deal. I want to see the signed copy. You know, so it was like, yes, I'm excited, but I haven't seen it, so maybe something could still go wrong. That's like in the back of your head. Maybe someone changes their mind, or something different happens. I don't know.
So John's asking you, how did you feel? And my question is, how many beers did you drink on the flight back?
I can't remember. Lucky it's only a 2-hour flight. So.
And when you saw it, did you phone your family?
Yeah, I phoned my family. My family came up, watched the game, and my brothers came up. I was up at Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria. Was my first game, but obviously it was from being selected to play my first game. I'm going jumping, but there was quite a big gap, because I went on the Tri Nations tour in 1997 with the Boks, but I didn't play in any of the games overseas in Australia or New Zealand, and I would only play the last game of the Tri Nations series after Gary Teichmann and Ruben Kruger had been injured. And that's where Rassie Erasmus and myself got an opportunity, started for the Boks against Australia in Pretoria. And it was my first game. So there was a bit of time in between, but it was amazing playing my first game. The whole family came up, everyone was there. It was just an incredible experience.
Mm-hmm. What was it like when you first arrived in the Springbok environment?
Yeah, it's quite daunting actually, because especially then, because you very much had a seniority in a junior division. So you came in and you sat in the front of the bus. You didn't say too much. You kept quiet. You did what was told. If there were bags lying on the ground or around the bus, you made sure you went and picked them up. So it was daunting, but mind blowing at the same time. You got these butterflies going through your stomach. It's just an amazing experience to be able to represent your country and being selected. It's something that you've set your heart on to do. So it was a real honor, a real privilege, and I really was blessed at that time. I'll never forget, I was the center of a bit of a debate between Gary Teichmann, the captain, and Louis Late, the administrator or the head of South African rugby at the time. Because they issued everyone, because you toured, they issued you with your Springbok blazer, but I hadn't played a game yet. So I couldn't really put the blazer on. So I would walk on the bus. I'd walk on the bus with the blazer over my arm.
Yes.
Gary and Louis Late would pull me aside and tell me, "You're a Springbok, put that blazer on." And then Gary Teichmann would pull me to the side and say, "You put that blazer on, we're going to blitz them you. You don't put that blazer on until you play."
Wait, let me just explain. Let me translate. If you put that blazer on, you're going to get sorted. Yes.
Because you've got to earn it. You've got to run onto the field first. So I would walk around, and I'll never forget, I think it was before the game in Australia. Louis Late came up to me and said, "Bros, you've been on this tour now for a week or two. Put the blazer on." And I said, "Doc Late, I can't. I haven't played for the Boks yet." He said, "Put it on." I said, "I can't, Doc." And I didn't put it on. And because that was I couldn't. Yeah. And Doc Late, you know what Doc Late was like back in those days. There's not many people that can say no. You can't say no to Doc Late, but I'd say no to him before I say no to the entire Springbok rugby team.
Yeah, well, for people who didn't know Doc Late, he was not a man used to being thwarted, was he?
No.
No,
but he understood. He was also he understood, because he didn't give me too much hard time, but he kept on telling me to put my blazer on. But he also didn't take it to the next level, so he did understand. So yeah, but it was good. It's part of my experience of and it makes it special. So it really does.
What did it? Let me step back for a moment and say I was at a high school reunion with you, Bros, probably 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. And you were the guest speaker, and there was a range of ages of guys who'd been at the same school as us, both our year and guys in their 70s, youngsters of about 20. And you were telling funny stories about rugby, and we were laughing. And then you said one line, and this hall full of guys sitting around the tables with beers and dinner and everything just went dead silent. And this one sentence you said was, "I remember the first time I pulled on a Springbok jersey and the place was silent." And I looked around and I realized, from older guys in their 70s to guys of 19, every single one of them was hanging on your words, because every single one of them would have pulled that jersey on and gone to play at that moment if they could. Right?
Oh, good.
What does it mean for a South African to pull on a Springbok jersey?
It's massive, and it's absolutely massive. And that's I think we've got to give credit to the late Nelson Mandela, because he's been such a great leader. And there was a time when we almost lost that Springbok jersey, because politically, obviously, it was associated with the past, and to move forward, a lot of people thought that we had to relinquish that Springbok. But that Springbok is etched in every one of our DNA and our veins and our arteries. And to play for the Springbok, when you put that Springbok jersey on, you just grow an extra 2-3 feet. it symbolizes what you want to, what the game is all about for us as South African, to play in their jersey, and then to take it another level further. Just because, I mean, this is a New Zealand show that we're talking about. The next thing is get it and play against New Zealand. I mean, that is what as a rugby player, what I want. I wanted to get the blazer, and I wanted to play against New Zealand. That was how it worked. It wasn't I want to play for South Africa, I want to play against England, or I want to play against Scotland. No, it was a play against New Zealand. And to have achieved that, and I've only had 2 tests, and I wish I could have had more, but I savor those 2 tests. I mean, the one it was
against the All Blacks.
Against the All Blacks, one at Ellis Park, one at Christchurch, and it's just amazing memories, and so grateful that I got the opportunity to be blessed to be able to wear that jersey.
What is it like standing there with your brothers in green and gold and facing the haka? And the All Blacks are letting rip.
Well, there's there's the respect for the All Black. There is respect for the haka, and then I believe it also feeds us, or the team that's viewing it as well, because yes, it's a moment that the All Blacks can use to prepare for the game, and it's their ritual to get into their game preparation. But I believe we can also use it as a preparation. When you sit and watch that haka, or you stand, you're confronted by that haka. You don't sit and watch it. You're confronted by it. You're challenged by it. It's happening in front of you. Man, if that's not going to spur you on to play the game of rugby and put your body on the line, then I don't know what is going to, because that's happening right in front of you. It's a direct challenge. You're looking at your opposite number. He's doing the haka. And if you can just stand there, savor it, come back and say, okay, now we're going to play the game, and use it positively. I mean, I think it's a wonderful part of the game.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at the haka. I'm not laughing at the Springboks, but bros, I'm looking at you, and you look like you could get up and go play right now. You're thinking about it, and I'm looking at your face, and you're picturing it, and you're seeing that opponent in front of you, and I'm just thinking, any minute now, Bros is going to get up and charge something. He's going to tackle something, right?
That's listen. I mean, that's the one thing I was always passionate about it. I mean, I might not be the most skillful, but the opportunity and the privilege to do that, I mean, is just amazing. So,
When you've lined up for the haka, who was opposite you?
It's all a blur. I've got to be honest. I can't remember who sat directly opposite me. It happened to me twice, and I mean, obviously, there were other games where, I mean, even when I was in Australia as a youngster, there were teams that came across from New Zealand that performed the haka in front of us. But I can't remember exactly who was in front of me. I just saw black, and I wasn't seeing faces. I must be honest. I mean, and I think that is that maybe different players in different positions see different things. And if you're a fly half, you've got to see the face. But sometimes when you're a loose forward, you see the jersey, and you challenged. I'm not worried about the individual. I'm worried about taking whoever's in that black jersey down. And it's just that the mindset might be different. If you're an outside back, you've probably got to assess the weaknesses of your opposite. But when I'm playing the position I was playing in, it didn't matter what face was in the jersey, but I had to take it down. So
I'm laughing because you're being what's the word I'm looking here? Discreet. You're saying if you're a forward, you just take it down. If you're one of those fancy backs out there, then then you've got time to look at people's faces and all that. But when you're doing the hard work up front,
more or less, it's that. But obviously, I mean, I mean, you've got to also use your brains. I mean, that's where a lot of the players, and New Zealanders, Australians, have been very good at.
Yeah. Let's go back to your first test, right? An incredible victory. You make your debut, and you thump the Wallabies, give them their worst hiding ever, 64-13, wasn't it?
Yeah, 61-22, I believe. Yeah.
Well, a couple of points here and there, including a try. What do you remember of that game?
I remember the bus journey there, the silence on the bus journey. I remember James dead silence on the journey. Everyone sitting looking outside the windows, and we travelled from Joburg to Pretoria, which is about a 40-minute drive. And I remember the blue lights for the police escorting us. I remember James Small, and he obviously tragically passed last year. I remember we didn't have iPods and Apple phones, and he had a Walkman, and I remember the music coming from him. I remember the anthems. So the in-between stages, I remember the anthems. And then I remember running out onto the field. I remember the goosebumps. And the next thing, the ball's being kicked. And then next thing you're scoring a try. And I mean, there's the energy from the stadium, and a full Loftus Versfeld is just an incredible place to play in front of. And when you score for your country, and then you've beaten an international side there, it's just an amazing. It's an amazing feeling, and I don't think there's much. It's just that really tops it. It's just incredible, absolutely incredible.
There's not many players that can say, by the way, you played 2 tests against the All Blacks. There's not many players that can say they have a 50% win rate against the All Blacks.
Well, I mean, I only had 2 games, so
Listen,
the
don't get
stack up.
Listen,
So
I know it's a small sample size, but you've got to take it if you can get it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, listen, I mean, the one we won, I think I came on as a reserve in that game and the one before. And I mean, that New Zealand side was good. And I'll never forget running onto Ellis Park. And I've just gone blank on the number 8's name. And I told the story the other day. He was so good. Ron Cribb. Ron Cribb was the number 8 for New Zealand. And in 2000, he was the most incredible number 8 in world rugby. He went on and had injuries. It wasn't really the same thereafter. But coming off the base of that scrum, Ron Cribb was a real threat. He was quick, he was strong, and I'll never forget running on. I think I was replacing Corne Krige, and ran onto that open side flanker. And Ole LaRue was my loose head prop. And we about 10, 15 meters out from the try line, and New Zealand had got the feed. Down in that scrum, and I knew that Ron Cribb would be coming from that scrum and would be going to go score a try. And if he scored that try, we lose the test match. There's like 10 minutes to go. And I said to Oli, as we get down, because Oli had this habit, between the two of us, we'd played many games at Super Rugby level together, and I'd be on that open side flanker. And he was strong enough to be able to shift his hips out, but keep his shoulders in and straight when I asked him. And I said, Ola, I'm going to need you on this one, boy. You're going to have to just throw those hips out, please. And then I used to invert my feet at flank to give me an extra step off. So I'd be half a meter ahead than what I would be if I ordinarily had my feet like you normally do when you bind there. And so I did that, got Ollie to throw his hips out a little bit, and I was expecting Ron Cribb to come, and as sure as nuts, he came on that thing, and Ron Cribb was sensational in 2000. It was probably one of the most important tackles I ever made in my life. No one even noticed it, but it was an important tackle to make. No, because it's an ordinary tackle, but it's just you run on test match, you've got to do it, and straight away you know that you're in a pressure cauldron against you're one of the greatest rugby nations, if not the greatest in the world.
I have a list of names here that we're going to run through shortly. I'm going to ask your immediate thoughts as I give you a name, and one of those names was Ron Cribb on my list to ask you about him, because he certainly was a very gifted player. Never seemed to quite fulfill his potential, right?
No, well, he just had that. He had that year in 2000. He had a great year in 2000, and then I think he had knee injuries, and it was just never the same again thereafter. But 2000, he was a real threat from the base of that scrum, and for New Zealand, he was a really, really good player.
Of all the teams you played for, and you played for a number of professional rugby teams, including at international level, which one had the best environment?
Oh, geez, that's an unfair question. That's very difficult, John.
Okay, so let's put it this way.
There were different environments.
Which one did you enjoy?
Well, again, I mean, there are different stages in a person's life, and they're different seasons, and so the experiences change as you proceed through, and not all of them are going to be the same. And we don't want them growing. If we're not growing, we're not developing. And if we're not growing, developing, then what are we doing here? So they were different, and I guess the start here when I got that first go, which I know I'd played a bit of provincial rugby 94, 95, but I really saw my first year and getting a go was 1997 when I had a chance with the Lions, and it was a very young Lions side, because that Lions side previously had been dominated by the 95 World Cup Springboks, your Francois Pienaar's, Rudolf Straley, Johannes Strydom, you can name the whole list, Jaapie Mulder, Henny LaRue, etc., etc. Some of them were left over, but a lot of them had left. And so it was a very young team that was coming through, and it was just to get that initial start. So there was a really good phase there for me. And then as well at the Sharks. I mean, the Sharks is the most idyllic place to play rugby. I don't think there's any place that's set up better to play the game of rugby. You've got this beautiful environment, great climate. You've got a beautiful stadium. You've got access to the sea where we were training 3 times a week, sometimes down on the coast and running or doing in and outs on the beach. And for me, that absolutely that talked to me. It warmed. I loved it. And you had a great vibe. And my house was only a 10-minute drive from the stadium, so that was great as well. I mean, I was a youngster at that stage, and then later on in my career, you're playing for the Bulls, and it's a different ethos altogether. And yes, I was the only English guy in that Bulls team when I was there, but it was an incredibly tight and strong-knit family that Heineke Meyer had built at that stage. And the Bulls were at the height of their power with Victor Matfield, Farid Dupree, Bakkies Botha, Gia Cronje, Donnie Rousseau. I mean, just there's 4 locks that we've mentioned that can play international rugby anywhere in the world, all of them at one union. And so it just went on. So, and to get there and then eventually get a start in that Currie Cup final at the end of the year in that team amongst that legendary side, I mean, it was amazing. And then experiences overseas as well, where you get thrown out of your, everyone thinks it's all glamorous and easy to go and play overseas and you pick up a contract. But remember, you walk into a club, you walk into a dressing shed or a change room, and sometimes you don't know a soul that you're walking into. And you walk in there and you've got to shake everyone's hands. And you've got to go rugby then. Once you're in that change room, there's only one place you earn the respect, and that's out on the field. And you've probably, being a foreigner coming in there, 9 times out of 10, there's a local guy that's lost a position because you've come in. You've got to, so but they are fantastic experiences. And then you're meeting people from other countries. I mean, I think it's Matt Sexton's birthday today, or it was yesterday, from New Zealand, played for the Crusaders at hooker. I meet him by going and meeting and playing for Ulster when I'm over in Ireland, and becomes a good mate of mine. And, getting introduced to people like that. Another guy, Paul Griffin, who's now still in Italy, but also from Christchurch, and played I think he played about 100 tests for Italy at scrum half. And now he's one of my good mates because we travel overseas. So how do I compare that experience as opposed to a really good one that I had at the Sharks or the Bulls? But they gave me different things that have all filtered into my life. So, and sometimes the tough times are there, and there are tough times in the sport. There are going to be tough times. There are going to be youngsters watching this thing. Hey, I want to be a professional sportsman. Hey, there's going to be times when you're going to get dropped. There's going to be times when you've had a shoulder operation, or you've torn ligaments, or you've broken bones, and things aren't going well for you. And it's about those times, and that's where the character comes out. And how are you going to pull yourself back out of that? What you're going to do? How are you going to train? Your attitude when you get back out there, and how you take a loss, and how you take a disappointment, and how you take being told that by your coach that he doesn't want to select you this week because he thinks someone else is good enough. And how are you going to react to that? Because not everyone's going to be your premier player that's always getting selected every week in and week out. And there's only a few percentage that are the cream of the crop, the Bowden Barretts and people like that, the Brian Abanas, et cetera, that just floated. They don't just float into a team. They put a lot of hard work beforehand. But they have that skill set and they've done the work, and they're just gifted players. Yes. They're just gifted players. The rest of us, you've got to work, and you're going to have disappointments, and it's part of the journey, and it's part of the experience, and it's something you've got to embrace it.
I'm not going to ask you. You talk about this thing about being gifted and putting in the work. I'm not going to ask you about the players, and we've all come across them at all different levels of sport who were gifted but didn't have the drive and didn't put the work in. But who, if you think back over your career, who stands out to you? Might be more than one. Who stands out to you as somebody who made the absolute most of their talent?
Sure, it's such a big question, Jono. It's hard for me to answer. I've got to be honest, without giving that a lot of thought, because I'll end up tripping myself up. But they're players that what was his name? There's a prop, Chittadini, that played for Calvazano, never played. I mean, where do I? Because everywhere I go, there would be players that outperform their station as well, because every team's got their player. So I think it's unfair to really nominate them. But this guy,
tell us about this guy.
I'm going to mention this guy. This guy hadn't played. He was a beast of it. He was a massive guy. He played. I think it was loose head or tight head, proper, can't quite remember, but never really been introduced to the skills. He was running around with us at training when I was at Calvazano, always on the periphery, and then we'd play these contact sessions, and you didn't want to tackle this guy because when he carried the ball, he had such strength and ability, but he hadn't come up through a rugby background like a New Zealand or South African. He'd grown up in Italy. And the amazing thing is I looked at this guy and he didn't really have the skills. And I would watch him after I'd retired 3-4 years later playing for Italy and thinking, my gosh, how well have you done? And you did have he had the physique, he had the strength, and he had all that, but he had to go and learn the skills of rugby. And he had gone and applied himself and learned the skills of rugby and was now playing for the Italian national side. Mm. And when I first met him, he was like running around the training field and we were thinking, you'll probably never see this guy again. And there are lots of stories like that. And it's really, and you can go to every province and every franchise that I was at. If I scratch the surface and give it some thought, there'll be someone there that you could pull that name out that and say, this is the guy. And and I think it's a message of hope, a big message of hope to all players out there. You know, it's just keep on keeping on and don't give up and don't keep on persevering, because you never know when that break's going to come. And when you get that break, you've got to be ready for that break and you've got to take it and go. That's the secret. You've got to put the training in, put the work in. Sometimes it comes before you've had the opportunity to do that, but that's rare. But it's you know, there's not just the most talented guys that always make it through. There are also the guys that work hard, that get through, and you know, guts, determination, work ethic. And I know there are lots of stories from New Zealand rugby that fit that category.
Which one of your coaches taught you the most?
Jeez.
I know they all contributed to your development, but which is the one that
you know, you'd have to, and it's probably the guy that coached me the longest, and that's Ian McIntosh. So, I mean, everywhere you'd have an under 21 coach, but he'd be fleeting. So he'd be involved in your life for a year or two. I suppose Mac, it was not, he had adopted, his mentor had been Rod McQueen from Australia. He had this theory about the advantage line, which is totally right and relevant in today's context as well. Get over the advantage line, play 15 against 10 men. And his whole game plan revolved around, that's why someone like Henry Honeyball was so good in that Sharks set up in the mid-90s, late 90s. And it's probably Mac, because I mean, I was exposed to Mac for the longest. And Mac was he was a true rugby coach, you know, a guy that's just a rugby coach. He is a rugby coach, and he's coached his whole life, and that's what he does as a rugby coach. And he viewed the game differently, and he vocalized himself well, and he was passionate about what he did, and he was actually quite humorous too. And so it would probably have to be Ian McIntosh. Yeah.
Did he have an impact on you outside of the pure game of rugby?
Not as much. I was very much in Mac's time. I was still a youngster coming through, so you know, that and Mac did have a big impact on a lot of the players outside of the game. But I was mainly my formative years coming into the game, 94, 95, coming back into it 97, 98, and then 99 he retired. But so he's more from a rugby point of view. It's amazing. I'm very good friends with the son. The son's probably out of rugby, had a big impact on me, but it's not Mac, it's the son, right. Craig. Yeah,
it's his son. Yeah, also played for the Sharks.
Also played a few games for the Sharks, and him and I played club rugby together for our club in Durban North in the 90s.
I was going to ask you, because leadership is such an important part of rugby, I was going to ask you about the captains that had a huge impact on you, the captains that really inspired you and brought the best out of you.
Gary Teichmann. I was lucky enough to play under Tosh. I would say Val Bartman, right in the really beginning, and I don't know if many New Zealanders remember him, but he was that flanker that played against New Zealand Cavaliers in it was in '88 in South Africa, and he was the Sharks captain, and he was an absolute legend. And for me, it was just his humility, and he didn't say much. Tosh had a big impact. Wayne Farvey, back in the Sharks. You know, they're basically the guys from my Durban days, which were my formative years, that had a bigger impact on me, I would say. And those are three of the captains that captained me during the Sharks.
Which teammate made you laugh? I can see you running through the stories. What can I tell?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, there's Craig Davidson, Trevor Halstead, Kevin Putt, New Zealander that's probably back in New Zealand. Yeah. So there are a couple.
I can see the stories there. You're going, no, I can't tell that.
Yeah.
I can't tell.
There are a couple.
I can't tell that. I can't tell.
Yeah,
Give us one that you can tell.
No, it's just these experiences. I mean, they all blend in. I mean, even 94, 90, 98. I remember being there with the Sharks. 97 with the Lions. Being in Hamilton, just outside, just where Paul, you guys are from, John, where you guys are staying. I remember staying in that motel. I remember there wasn't much to do. I remember the weather wasn't great. I remember playing. We'd get into teams playing one bounce in the courtyard that was like the driveway of this motel, and we'd all be playing one bounce. And eventually, it gets so boring, you start adding little gimmicks onto it. And the guy who loses the one bounce then has to take his shirt off, and eventually he's playing there with no clothes on, or he has to run in the streets. And you're finding little funny things to do, and I mean, there's something. Or we did that. We'd end up doing it in the middle of you'd have games in the corridors in Queenstown at the hotel we'd stay in. And we'd be playing cricket down the corridor because there's nothing else to do. And then some hotel guest would walk out, and then some guy would have a penalty that we're given. And obviously the guy might be in a compromising situation, and then the side could walk out. So there's so many different. Or the difference in language barriers, when I travelled with the Bulls, and you arrive in Canberra, and I don't even know, because there's translation. It's going into New Zealand, so you don't know the translations. But the guy Donnie Rousseau says who in Afrikaans span bestuurder means drive, like who drives the team, and. Right. So he gets to the hotel and he says, he doesn't ask who's the manager of the hotel. He says, who drives this hotel? Because he can't quite translate the English Afrikaans translation. And I mean, it doesn't, when you know the translation, then you're going to laugh. And the same with, he gets there. I remember him getting to his room, and he's rooming with Jacques Cronje, and they're sitting in this room in Canberra in Australia. And it was before we had SMS and WhatsApp and all this kind of stuff. And he phones downstairs, and he phones the lady downstairs at reception, and he says, excuse me, in his broken English Afrikaans, he says, excuse me, miss, I'm suspecting a fax, can you please send it up to the room? Because he's expecting a fax that's coming through from home, from South Africa, but he gets the words wrong, and he's just arrived in this hotel, and he's telling the lady to send the fax up to the room. Yeah. So there's lots of little stories. Running around in Cape Town with Dick Muir at like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to raid the pantry in the hotel restaurant, and naughty stuff like that. That's all fun.
And hang on, staying in a motel. I mean, they're like 5-star hotels nowadays. You guys are staying in motels. Jeez.
We were staying in a motel, mate, with this rickety old bed. And shame, I mean, someone in that motel, it might still be running, I'm not sure, but got some fantastic memories of that motel, and having breakfasts and drinking coffees in the communal eating area. Yeah, but there wasn't much to do, and it certainly wasn't 5-star.
Who was the teammate who had you thinking, how does he do that?
There's probably two.
And I'm talking about as a player, when you.
Etienne Botha. I don't know if you remember Etienne Botha, the late Etienne Botha. He was killed in a car accident in 2005.
Yes. With the blonde.
Played for the Bulls.
The blonde lot.
Yeah, and he was playing. He was playing inside centre. Van Andorlevier was always sitting on the bench, and he never got selected for the Springboks. Probably the most unlucky for me out of all the players I played. It's probably the most unlucky player not to have played for the Springboks. The most incredible, incredibly gifted player that could step off either foot and was so quick on the field. And scored. If you go look in 2005, go look for highlight reels of him, and go look at the tries that he scored for that Bulls team. It was just incredible. And I'll never forget that Currie Cup final that year. And I was trying to run on the inside and support him, and he stepped. I think it was off the left foot to come infield, and he just took off. He literally accelerated about 10, 15 meters ahead, and I was nowhere near supporting him. I was coming in. I would have arrived wherever he was going to arrive 3-4 seconds later, because he was just incredible. And the other guy was Brosnihan. You know, and what used to really blow my mind in the short time that I was able to play in the same team as him was it was more at training than in the game. Was when you go through those training runs and you're going through your plays, and you just see Brosnihan coming off through the line, and he comes through with such speed, and you think, "Jeepers, where did that come from?" And you trying to plod along, trying to keep up, and I mean, this out and out athlete just comes searing through. So they were the two that I could say that I would be sometimes in the field and I go, "Jeepers, how did he just do that?"
Finish the sentence for me. If Brosnihan had played at the end of an All Black backline.
Yes. And I'll put a but there, because he had Fourie du Preez. We forget this. A lot of his tries were scored from Fourie du Preez was central, and Fourie du Preez's kicking game was incredible. And if you go look at some of those highlight tapes of Brian, go just look and see how many of those tries he scored that were from kicks from Fourie. So if he played on that, and I'm not saying, I mean, the New Zealanders are great halfbacks and stuff and great players. And remember, Brian was an incredible athlete, and he used to, a lot of his plays, he'd score off Fourie looking for the space, popping him into that space, Fourie du Preez, or a lot of the kicks from Fourie du Preez. So we see Brian scoring the try, but we've also got to see what happened just before that try and who was involved. Brian then had the intercept try. He was very good at finishing. If he'd been on the end of All Black backline, yes, I know the All Blacks definitely give it, move the ball more, and especially from counter attack have always been lethal. So Brian would have been in his element. But jeepers, if you look at the wingers that the All Blacks have produced over the last 10 years, I mean, it's frightening and staggering. Some of the guys, and it's not staggering who's in the team; it's staggering who they leave out the team at wing. So it's not like New Zealand have had any shortage of wingers. But Brian would have been lethal there. But I also, I mean, my point is that him and Fourie du Preez had a very good understanding. So if you lift Brian out by himself, maybe some of those tries that Fourie helped set up, we wouldn't have seen scored. But Brian still was a phenomenal athlete, and wherever he went, he would have been amazing, absolutely amazing. And the big thing about Brian is his humility as well, which I want to admit.
Really?
Because we talk about him as an athlete, talk about him as a try-scoring freak, and also he's just a damn good bloke off the field as well, and very humble.
Right. Last question, bros. Everything is up for grabs at the moment. The whole structure of rugby, the calendar, the timetable, the tournaments, and I'm going to appoint you as World Rugby Commissioner, you know, a la US sports, like the NBA commissioner or the NFL commissioner, right? And you are the benevolent dictator of world rugby, right? And you can change whatever you like. You can keep whatever you like. You can institute whatever you like. If I was to ask you, what would you do?
I think God has given us a window here. Everyone has pulled back. Everyone's looking to the new normal and what happens when we come out of Corona. I believe this Corona now maybe is giving us a moment to pause and a moment to reflect and a moment to look on where the state of the game is at the moment. And we are passionate. I mean, all of us are passionate rugby supporters, but we've got to be honest and say, has rugby grown? What's happened with rugby? What happened in the Rugby World Cup? I think we got more eyeballs on the telly screen than ever before. We have more people watching Rugby World Cup semi-finals, England against New Zealand, Japan against South Africa, Ireland against Japan, Scotland against Japan. We've never had so many people viewing the game. What we're doing to grow it, and I think this enforced stop in our game is something we could never ever have done. And maybe we've got opportunity now to have a look and see where we're going. Why are we playing Super Rugby games that we see a game being played in Eden Park, Ellis Park, Loftus Park, Sydney Football Stadium, wherever you want it, and the ground is empty, and we've got 10,000 people watching a game of rugby. We should be filling the stadium. And what have we done wrong? Where have we erred? Do we go into this? And maybe we've got to look at this calendar and say, let's get this thing. We've had to stop this thing, and now we don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't know when we're going to be. When we're going to be watching the game of rugby again. We don't know when the next Super Rugby game is going to take place, when the next Springbok All Black game is going to be taking place, or the Bledisloe Cup, or whatever it is. We don't know where it's going to happen. Maybe we've got to pause here. Let's get our calendar in line now and say, isn't this the time now to shift the whole global season? Why wait until 2022, 21, whenever they're talking about it? Because right now you've got something that's happened that's closed the gate, shut the stadiums, got everyone into their homes, and everyone is sitting and listen. Great books and great works are written in times like this, where you've got time to reflect and time to sit and think about what we're doing. And I think we've got to have a good look at rugby and see how we grow it, because we just had a 2019 Rugby World Cup that was the most incredible Rugby World Cup, hosted by a nation that did an incredible job through tsunamis, through everything, and managed to deliver and get eyeballs on the game. But what's happened thereafter? And we're not filling the stadiums up. Super Rugby, there's a problem. We need to get more people back in. We need to get people into the stadiums. How are we going to do it? What's our strategy? Asking me to give it right now? Well, I don't know. I've got to sit and think about it. But I do believe we should. Maybe we got to look at aligning these seasons. We've had to stop now. Europe stopped. The whole world has stopped. 80% of the global workforce at the moment is not working. 80% of the global workforce is sitting in situations like this. If you are working from home. If we look at the oil price in America has gone below zero. At the moment, it's a negative on per gallon. So we're living in times that we've never lived in before. But maybe we should be using these times and how we're going to emerge from these times better and in a better position as a rugby union. And maybe this is the time. Why wait another year or two if we're going to do this global season? And I know that we've got there's Bill Beaumont and Augustine Pichot challenging each other at the moment for the whoever heads up World Rugby. Come on, just get these things moving. Let's get going. We've got to pause at the moment and use this pause so when we come back, we can grow from it and we can move forward with a plan and do it collectively. And it's not Six Nations against Southern Hemisphere and division. And if you look at what's happening, Six Nations are still alive and kicking. I mean, there's what we see there. It's pretty healthy, but we've also got to look at some of the massive stadium we've got here in South Africa, the 50,000 seaters that we're not filling, that we're putting 10, 15,000 bums on the seats and it looks empty. And we're comparing that to a European season where the Exeter, what are they called, Exeter Kings or the Bears?
Chiefs.
Are playing against the Leicester Tigers, and they've got 10,000 or 12,000 in the stadium, but it's absolutely rip-roaring and looks like it's a full stadium. But in South Africa, we've got all these 50,000 seaters that you don't have an atmosphere when the stadium's empty. We've got to relook at the game, look at how we're going to position it and where we're going to grow it. But it's a big question. It's an important question, John, and it's not my job every day to be doing that kind of thing, because obviously I'm doing my work on the sideline, but it's part of what we're passionate about this game, and we want to grow this game to make sure that our generation and my kids and the future generation are playing this wonderful game that unites us, that allows me in South Africa to be sitting here in Joburg talking to people down in New Zealand purely because of the love of the game of rugby.
Brilliant interview. Thank you very much, Warren, for giving us your time.
No problem.